Hi, you're listening to Sharing Values Across Borders, a podcast featuring Christoph Stuckelberger as he recounts the first 20 years of the Globethics story. So why was there that shift in the 20, why is the first, was it just time to move on from business ethics, or was it somehow more intentional? Or tell me a little bit about that. I'm curious about that part.
The target groups have always been quite broad because we said ethics has relevance for business leaders, for academic leaders, for governments, for NGOs. But the focus on business was because business are drivers in development. Business are had many challenges in ethical business, and the first international conferences between 2008 and 2015 have been mainly focused on business, with big companies, with smaller SMEs. The shift then was because there was a boom then coming especially after 2007, with the financial crisis. Many people said, oh, now wake up, we have to do something if we have these crooks, who run the world economy. So business ethics, CSR, corporate social responsibility, all these topics became almost mainstream, and there were a number of new actors. The companies themselves organized huge conferences, networks, what else, and we felt less the need because we have been more pioneering in the 2004 to I would say to 16, 15 on that. The second reason was that we had always, since the beginning, in our network, a big part, I would say the majority of our active users came from the academic world, from universities. So we said we should serve them more, those we have already in the network.
Right,
a lot of professors, a lot of students. Among the 200,000 registered participants, always about 50-60% were students, and then maybe 30% professors or teachers, and 10-20% private sector, governments, NGOs. So that was the second, and the third is that we observed that ethics in higher education there were not many actors working on that.
So in this first piece of the narrative, in the first decade, when the focus was a lot on business ethics, and that was kind of the milieu in which Globethics was founded, what kind of projects, what kind of initiatives were you doing? I have a note, for example, that there was training on 4 different continents for capacity building and leadership and these kind of things. So what practically did that look like?
One key pillar was always the annual conference. Big conferences in Geneva, but also in other continents. We had an international conference in Indonesia, in India, in South America, I think too. For example, in 2015 on transformative leadership, how can business leaders integrate ethical issues. But then also on the research level, we had a very interesting project, a global project in 2009, 2010, a global survey on business ethics. And that was, of course, also academic already. But what are the methods, the standards, the practices of teaching business ethics around the world? So it was a global survey with continental and country-wise. It is a big book that we published. with a famous business ethics professor and colleague who worked for a year also in Geneva with that. Deon Rosso from South Africa. And it was, again, this global aspect to compare the comparison of different approaches on business ethics, but then also to identify the gaps where we can learn from each other, but also where we want to strengthen business ethics curricula. Then we had a few also concrete examples of exchange. For example, China, Africa. We had a visit of 30 business leaders, entrepreneurs, to visit Kenya. And it was because most of them had no exposure and no experience in Africa, and to increase mutual understanding. Because business already 10 years ago, of course, was very lively between China and Africa. But we felt there were they were raising conflicts of criticism of Chinese behavior in Africa, at the same time raising expectations and interactions. And we wanted to show them also really to have a dialogue on equal eyes. And it was interesting that it was an eye-opener, because some Chinese were convinced they are better, they are faster, they are more competent, and to discover that really they can have a fair dialogue on equal footing, or how do you say it? And then also they discovered the emotional and spiritual side in Africa. For example, it was most of them were Christian entrepreneurs from China, and the second day we went to a worship, and I mean with the drums, with the dancing, with the power, and they had tears. They had tears. They said, "I've never seen that. So different from our culture, the quiet Chinese, and they were overwhelmed by the emotion and the energy." They said, "Wow, so wonderful." So that was an icebreaker, just to experience that Africans have such an energy in that. And then, of course, the analytical part came also with dialogue, with analysis of situations, of testimonials from entrepreneurs' experience in Africa and Africans in China, and so on.
It sounds wonderful. I remember I did a student exchange in Norway in 2007. And this was around the time that the Church of Norway had a rule where all liturgy on Sunday had to start at the same time. It was the law that church had to start at 11, for example. And I was an exchange student, but all of the other exchange students were Lutherans from Tanzania and Kenya.
Okay.
And so we went to the head office of the Church in Norway, and these Norwegians had this big presentation about how they were dropping this rule, and church could now start at 10 or 10:30. And the Norwegians were so impressed by this liberalization of the church laws. And they were done the presentation, and the colleagues, I remember the look on the faces of the colleagues from Tanzania, and you could just hear the crickets in the room. They were like, they looked at me and they're like,
"What is that about?"
They're like, you know what I mean? They're like,
I imagine.
It was totally lost. But the Norwegians didn't get why they weren't impressed. and the Tanzanians didn't get what the big fuss was about. And I was the only one in the room that was kind of in on the joke, and it was so funny. So I can only imagine.
I can imagine. They say, yeah, but we celebrate anyway from 9 to 6 in the afternoon.
Who is to schedule the Holy Spirit? You know, this kind of thing.
No, it's, I can imagine.
Yeah, it was so funny.
Yeah. We also had business leaders in the board. Mm-hmm. For example, let us take an example. The co-founder of Infosys, mm-hmm. Shibulal, his name. That's his full name. He doesn't use any family name. It's Shibulal. He's co-founder of Infosys, and Infosys is the biggest or second biggest, depending on the year, IT company of India, mm-hmm. Giant. And so he brought this business perspective, and I was always impressed how he, as a Hindu married with a Christian wife, has expressed this interest or need to have ethical reflection in this giant company. Mm. And even he invited me to give a training for top leaders in the company. Mm-hmm. So we tried to find solutions for concrete dilemmas and questions. And I just give an example. I asked them, what are your ethical issues? One among many was how to deal with the fact that we are in a pluralist society in India, and we have so many holidays, mm-hmm. Indian holidays, the Diwali and all the rest. And then we have Christians and we have Muslims, and everybody has its holiday, and what is the fair rule for that? So that was an ethical question for them in leadership, to be respectful to holiday traditions in the pluralist society, and at the same time to manage it. They said every month we have absences, if we allow to, we have more than 20 or 30 holidays, days mm-hmm. of holiday. Mm-hmm. It's not feasible. So we had with these top leaders, we had a training workshop. What are the ethical issues? So how to respect the different traditions, at the same time how to run a business which is making money, and so on. So and they came up with a solution then in the discussion that they defined a number of days, I think 12 days, that each employee can take, but for their holidays. Mm-hmm. Some, of course, are common national holidays, and so to manage these kind of things. So this is just an example of in-house training mm-hmm. in a company. That was not the major focus of Globethics, but still we did it in other countries also, or companies.